Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're doing something a bit different. We're not just looking at one story, but synthesizing a whole stack of sources.
Right.
Sources that together give us a real snapshot of India's current position on the world stage. Think of it like a curated news bulletin.
Exactly. We're pulling out the key facts, the context.
And the so what?
Yeah.
The implications. We've got developments in elite sports, some really transformative domestic tech, and these, well, deeply tangled global geopolitical issues.
It's an incredible mix, isn't it? Pressure points and progress all happening at once. What these sources really show is India juggling multiple things simultaneously.
Right.
You've got the physical demands in sports right up against deadlines, then this huge leap towards technological self-reliance.
Yeah.
And all of that is happening against this backdrop of, tough U.S. trade demands, international security allegations. It's complex, multi-layered.
So our mission today is to give you, our listener, a quick but thorough understanding. We're going through 7 major developments, sticking strictly to the facts in our source material.
Systematically unpacking each one, focusing on the strategy, the immediate impact.
Okay, let's unpack this. How about we start with the cricket? The adrenaline and maybe the exhaustion on the pitch.
Right, the first headline we have details this thrilling victory for India. They beat Sri Lanka in a super over in the Asia Cup 2025 Super 4 match.
Thrilling, yes, but the source material points out something interesting. Technically, this match was a dead rubber for the tournament standings.
Meaning it didn't affect qualification?
Exactly. But that term, dead rubber, it feels a bit misleading here, doesn't it? Because it clearly turned into this incredibly dramatic showdown.
Oh, absolutely. Not dead at all in terms of intensity. It pushed everyone to their limits, even if the points weren't strictly needed. The psychological pressure must have been immense.
You could feel it. India set a big target, 202 for 5. That's a serious score in T20 cricket.
It really is. And the source highlights who got them there. Abhishek Sharma, explosive with 61 runs.
Quick runs there.
Very. Then Tilak Varma, crucial with 49 not out at the end. And Sanju Samson adding a solid 39. These aren't easy innings. They take a lot out of you.
But Sri Lanka, they didn't just roll over. They came back hard.
They really did. A spirited chase, as the source calls it, anchored by Pathum Nissanka, who hit a brilliant century.
100 in a run chase like that. Huge pressure.
Immense. And he had that big partnership with Kusal Perera, 127 runs. That stand really put the pressure back on India's bowlers.
Enough pressure to tie the scores, which meant
Super over. High stakes, high nerves.
and India pulled it off there.
They did, largely thanks to Arshdeep Singh, their pace bowler. In that situation, conceding only 2 runs and taking 2 wickets, that's match-winning stuff.
Incredible under pressure.
Totally. It basically decided it. Captain Suryakumar Yadav just needed 3 runs, and he got them with 1 shot. Job done.
The source also mentions a little bit of controversy during the main match. Something about a run-out.
Yeah. Dasun Shanaka's run-out was apparently disputed. Didn't change the ultimate result, but it just adds to that picture of, high tension, every decision scrutinized, elite sport.
So the big takeaway here, according to the source, the cost of the win.
Exactly. Staying undefeated is great for morale, obviously. But the fight was so close. The physical and emotional demands were massive.
And that raises red flags about fatigue, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Across the whole team.
It does. And here's the kicker. The schedule. This intense match. Say it happened Wednesday.
The final against Pakistan is just 2 days later, Friday.
Right. 48 hours. That's barely enough time to recover physically, let alone mentally process a nail-biter like that super over win.
That's a huge challenge for the team management.
It's their immediate problem. They have to nail the recovery protocols, maybe think about rotating players, managing workloads carefully.
Do you risk playing key players who might be tired? Or do you trust your bench strength right before the biggest game?
That's the decision. So the squad's resilience, their depth, it's not just talk anymore. It's being tested right now under extreme pressure just before the final.
So that close call, even though it was a win, it's almost like a warning shot about needing rest and smart management.
Precisely. A highlight warning.
Okay, so from physical resilience on the field, let's pivot to national resilience, but in the tech space. Completely different arena, but maybe just as demanding.
It's a fascinating transition. We're moving from the pitch to India's digital infrastructure. Prime Minister Narendra Modi launched nearly 98,000 new 4G towers.
98,000, that's a huge number.
It is. And crucially, alongside that, a fully indigenous Swadeshi 4G network.
Yeah.
This isn't just buying tech, it's claiming technological mastery.
Building the whole system themselves, essentially.
Pretty much. This isn't just about adding more towers, it's about building the core communication network for the nation. The scale is massive.
Who's it serving? What's the reach?
The aim is over 22 million new customers initially. But significantly, it's designed to be the foundation for future upgrades like 5G.
Right.
And it also marks the completion of this big 4G saturation project.
Tell us more about that. What did that project involve?
It focused on connecting nearly 30,000 villages. Many of these are in really challenging areas. Think remote regions, border areas.
Places that might have had little or no connectivity before.
Exactly. Places that were historically underserved. So providing reliable digital services there, it's not just about economics, it's strategic. It helps connect people, including defense personnel in border regions, to their families. It closes the information gap.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's unpack this Swadeshi element.
Yeah.
We hear that term, a Madar Forat, self-reliance. But what does it actually mean to build your own 4G network? Who did the work?
It means India owns the whole technological stack, the intellectual property. Most countries buy their core telecom infrastructure from maybe, 3 or 4 global giants.
Right, like Nokia, Ericsson, Huawei.
Precisely. But this network, deployed by the state-owned BSNL, uses technology developed entirely within India. It's a direct embodiment of that self-reliance vision.
So, for someone not in the weeds of telecom tech, what are the key pieces they had to build domestically?
Okay, there are basically 3 incredibly complex main parts to a mobile network. First, you need the radio access network, the RAN. That's the gear, the antennas and software that connects your phone to the network. That came from Tejas Networks.
An Indian company.
Yes. Second, the core network. This is the brain, the central hub managing all the data, calls, billing, everything. Developed by CDOT, another Indian entity.
CDOT, Center for Development of Telematics.
That's the one. And third, you need someone to make all these pieces work together seamlessly. That massive integration job was handled by TCS, Tata Consultancy Services.
Wow. So they built the radios, the core brain, and stitched it all together. That is genuinely impressive, especially controlling the core network software that's usually the domain of just a handful of global players.
It really is, and the sources emphasize this. The system is entirely software-driven and cloud-based.
Meaning it's flexible, scalable.
Highly flexible, very scalable, and potentially more secure because they control the whole architecture. This puts India in a very exclusive club. Countries that can design, manufacture, and deploy their own complete telecom infrastructure end-to-end.
So no longer dependent on foreign vendors for this absolutely critical national infrastructure.
Correct. And that independence has another huge benefit: future-proofing.
How so?
The source confirms the system is future-ready. It's designed so it can be upgraded to 5G smoothly, almost like a software update.
Okay.
This control means they can adopt future technologies without being dependent on shifting global politics or, say, supply chain problems with foreign vendors.
That's a massive strategic advantage. What about the tangible benefits? The source mentioned how this actually impacts people's daily lives.
Yes, it gives some really concrete examples. Think about students in rural Bihar finally getting stable internet for online classes. That helps level the playing field for education. Or farmers in Punjab getting real-time market prices on their phones. That gives them more power in negotiations, better planning.
Huge economic difference.
Definitely. And entrepreneurs, say, in the Northeast, can now access much wider markets, national or even global, breaking out of previously isolated local economies. This infrastructure isn't just lines on a map. It fundamentally changes connectivity for, 1.4 billion people?
But that amazing story of building things up domestically, achieving that tech independence, it runs smack into the hard realities of global politics.
It really does. The next set of sources reveals a pretty stark ultimatum, highlighting the intense pressure India is facing right now.
What's the headline?
The U.S. has told India, quite directly, that reducing its imports of Russian crude oil is now an essential condition for finalizing a bilateral trade deal.
Wow. Okay, so buy less Russian oil or the trade deal is off the table.
Or at least significantly stalled. This is a classic example of using trade leverage for foreign policy goals. Cutting the Russian oil imports is framed as the key condition for lowering those very high U.S. tariffs on Indian goods.
The ones currently at 50%.
That's the figure cited. And the source suggests those tariffs were specifically put in place to pressure India on this very issue to reduce its reliance on discounted Russian oil.
And the U.S. justification is?
That India's purchases, even at a discount, are effectively funding Russia's war effort in Ukraine. It's an attempt to push India towards the G7 sanctions coalition's position without India formally joining.
How has India responded to this pressure?
Consistently and firmly. Their line is, these oil purchases are purely economic decisions. Russia offered huge discounts after Western sanctions kicked in, and India argues it has a duty to secure affordable energy for its massive population, especially with global energy markets being so volatile.
Makes sense from their perspective. But did they just state their case, or did they push back?
Oh, they pushed back. Indian officials criticized the U.S. stance, calling it unfair, even hypocritical.
Hypocritical, how so?
They pointed out that many Western countries, including U.S. allies, are still trading with Russia in various sectors. Maybe not oil directly in the same way, but other goods, services, sometimes finding workarounds or exemptions for essential things.
So the argument is, why single India out with these massive tariffs if others are still engaging economically with Russia?
Exactly. If buying from Russia supports their military, why aren't other Western nations facing similar penalties? That's the core of their counterargument.
And India didn't just complain, they made a specific request, right, to offset any potential cut in Russian oil.
Yes, a very strategic move. They asked for access to alternative oil supplies that are also currently under sanctions, specifically naming Iran and Venezuela.
Ah, interesting. Putting the ball back in the U.S. court.
Precisely. It forces the U.S. into a tough spot. Either they grant India access to Iranian or Venezuelan oil, undermining their own sanctions policies, or they refuse, which could lead to the global energy price spikes India warned about if Russian supplies are simultaneously restricted. It's a clever negotiating tactic.
Did India offer any compromises?
The sources mention Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal offered some practical concessions. Things like increasing purchases of American defense equipment and U.S. energy products.
Trying to sweeten the deal? Show goodwill?
Basically, yes. Demonstrating a willingness to boost the strategic economic relationship with the U.S., even while disagreeing strongly on the Russian oil issue. But that core tension remains. U.S. foreign policy aims versus India's energy security needs.
We need to see this in the broader context of U.S. policy under Trump. The source highlighted a difference in how the U.S. is treating India versus China on this issue.
Yes, that contrast is really telling about U.S. strategic calculations. President Trump explicitly linked cutting Russian oil to his goal of isolating Russia economically. But at the same time, the U.S. hasn't slapped similar huge tariffs on China, even though China's also buying massive amounts of Russian oil, perhaps even more than India.
Why the difference?
The reason given in the source is the desire to maintain what it calls a fragile trade truce with China, to avoid reigniting a full-blown trade war.
So it suggests the U.S. is willing to use tough trade measures against a partner like India to force foreign policy alignment,
while being more cautious with a geopolitical rival like China, prioritizing trade stability there. It really puts India in a difficult position. The finalization of this U.S.-India trade deal seems to hinge entirely on whether India is willing or able to make major concessions on its energy sourcing concessions that could be economically painful and politically unpopular at home.
Okay, let's shift gears from energy markets and geopolitics to something equally vital, public health and pharmaceuticals. A big development here. India's drug regulator approved Ozempic.
Yes, Novo Nordisk's massive blockbuster drug, approved specifically for managing type 2 diabetes in India. This is a really significant step for India's healthcare system.
Why so significant? Is diabetes a particularly big problem there?
It's huge, and it's growing rapidly. Lifestyle factors, urbanization, genetics, it all contributes. India has one of the largest diabetic populations in the world, so getting access to the latest, most effective treatments like Ozempic is critical.
And Ozempic, the active ingredient is semaglutide, right? It's part of that class of drugs, the GLP-1 agonists.
That's right. GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. These drugs mimic a natural hormone your body releases when you eat.
What does that hormone do? And why is mimicking it so effective?
It does two main things really effectively. First, it tells your pancreas to release insulin, but only when your blood sugar is high. So it helps control blood sugar levels without causing dangerous lows, which can happen with older insulin therapies.
Okay, better blood sugar control. That's the second thing.
The second, and this is why it's become so famous globally, is that it slows down how quickly your stomach empties and it acts on your brain to reduce appetite. This leads to significant weight loss for many patients.
Ah, so it tackles both blood sugar and weight. That's a double win for type 2 diabetes management.
Exactly. For patients dealing with this chronic condition, often linked with obesity, having a drug that addresses both is truly transformative compared to older treatments that might even cause weight gain.
And the way it's taken is also an improvement.
Yes, the source notes it's a once-weekly injection. That's much more convenient for patients than, say, daily pills or multiple daily insulin shots. Better convenience usually means people are more likely to stick with the treatment.
So a major medical step forward. But the timing of this approval is also really interesting, isn't it? It coincides with something else happening in the market.
It absolutely does. This approval lands just as the patent protection for semaglutide in India is nearing its end. We're talking early 2026.
So the brand name drug gets approved, gets established in the market.
Right before the door opens for generic competition, it sets the stage for what the source calls an intense generic race.
What does that mean in practical terms? Are Indian companies already gearing up?
They are, in a big way. This is where India's strength as the pharmacy of the world really comes into play. Major Indian pharma companies, the source mentions names like Dr. Reddy's, Biocon, Sun Pharma, are investing heavily right now.
Investing in what? R&D? Manufacturing?
Both. Research and development to formulate their own versions, and scaling up manufacturing capacity so they can hit the market fast with cost-effective generic semaglutide as soon as that patent expires.
And the goal is accessibility, right? Making it affordable for a much wider population.
That's the key driver. The brand name drug is expensive. Generic versions will dramatically bring down the cost, making this breakthrough treatment accessible across different socioeconomic levels in India.
The source also mentions something about differentiation, that the generics might not just be simple copies.
Right. Some companies aren't just planning to make injectable generics. The really sophisticated players are working on developing oral versions of semaglutide.
A pill instead of an injection.
Exactly. That's a major technical hurdle, getting a large molecule like semaglutide absorbed properly when taken orally. But if they can crack it, it gives them a huge advantage over the original injectable form.
So Novo Nordisk gets its drug approved, but the Indian generic industry is poised to compete fiercely, maybe even innovate beyond the original format.
That's the dynamic. Novo Nordisk will fight to keep its market share, of course, but the scale and capability of the Indian generic sector means this competition is going to reshape diabetes treatment in India, and likely other markets too. Especially given, as you mentioned, the rising rates of obesity often linked with diabetes in India. This drug addresses a critical need.
All right, we need to shift now to what is arguably the most sensitive and diplomatically charged issue among our sources today. New U.S. federal court documents have emerged.
Yes, and they contain some extremely serious allegations. They allege involvement by an Indian government agent in a murder-for-hire plot.
And critically, the source says the alleged plot wasn't just targeting someone in the U.S.
That's right. The scope seems broader. The court documents apparently suggest the plot extended to targeting individuals in other countries, specifically mentioning Pakistan or Nepal.
That elevates it significantly. Who is at the center of the U.S. case?
The case focuses on Nikhil Gupta, an Indian national. He was extradited from the Czech Republic back in June 2023.
And the allegation against him.
He's accused of attempting to arrange the assassination of Gurpatwant Singh Panun. Panun is a prominent Sikh activist based in the U.S., and he's the legal advisor for Sikhs for Justice, or SFJ.
SFJ, the group advocating for Khalistan, a separate Sikh state.
Correct. And the U.S. prosecutors aren't just saying Gupta acted alone.
No, the source material links him directly to Indian intelligence.
Yes. The claim is that Gupta was acting under orders from a man named Vikash Yadav. Yadav is identified in the documents as an officer in India's external intelligence agency, RAW, the Research and Analysis Wing.
And Yadav, the alleged handler, where is he?
He remains in India, according to the sources, which obviously makes the diplomatic situation incredibly complicated. The fact that prosecutors are naming an alleged officer and the agency involved shows the level of detail they believe they have.
And this U.S. plot is being linked to another killing.
Precisely. The documents explicitly connect Gupta and Yadav to the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Nijjar, the Sikh activist who was shot dead in Canada in 2023. That case already caused a major diplomatic row between India and Canada.
It did. And the potential scope mentioned in these new documents planning further assassinations in Pakistan or Nepal transforms this from a bilateral issue into a much wider transnational security concern.
How has the Indian government officially responded to these very serious allegations?
It's been a cautious balancing act. Regarding the Nijjar killing in Canada, India flatly denied any government involvement.
Okay.
However, they did acknowledge conducting their own internal investigation. And that probe, according to India, found that the plot originated with what they termed rogue agents within the government.
Rogue agents. Implying it wasn't state-sanctioned policy?
That's the implication. They stated that this internal finding led to the removal of the official deemed responsible. As for Nikhil Gupta, the man charged in the U.S., he has pleaded not guilty.
What's the fallout from all this diplomatically? Especially with countries like Canada and the U.S. that have large Sikh populations.
The impact is pretty severe. It's definitely inflaming the already tense situation with Canada, where, remember, several Indian nationals have now been arrested and charged in connection with Nijjar's death.
Right.
And it puts further strain on the relationship with the U.S., which, as we discussed, was already dealing with friction over trade and the Russian oil issue. These kinds of allegations really erode trust, making cooperation on security and intelligence much harder, even with the rogue agent explanation.
The source mentions the trial for Gupta is coming up relatively soon.
Yes, scheduled for November 3rd in the Southern District of New York.
And the prosecutors, what kind of evidence are they pointing to?
They cite quite a range of evidence, according to the source. Things like WhatsApp messages, emails detailing the alleged assassination plans, discussions about payments, even talk about sourcing weapons.
So potentially quite detailed evidence.
It seems so. The outcome of this trial will be watched very closely around the world. If these allegations are substantiated in a U.S. court, it could have really profound and long-lasting consequences for India's international standing, particularly with its key Western partners.
Okay, let's circle back to trade policy, specifically U.S. actions, but hitting a different sector this time. Pharmaceuticals. Another big announcement.
Yes, a really significant one. The U.S. has announced a new tariff, a 100% tariff on imported, branded, and patented pharmaceutical drugs.
100%. That's essentially doubling the cost overnight. When does this take effect?
Not immediately. It's set for October 1st, 2025. So there's a lead time.
And this came directly from President Trump.
Yes, announced via his Truth Social platform. The policy itself is pretty blunt.
What's the stated goal?
It's about bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., reducing reliance on foreign suppliers for critical medicines, and securing domestic supply chains. That 100% tariff is a huge incentive, or maybe a threat, designed to push global pharmaceutical companies to build or expand manufacturing facilities inside the United States. If you make it here, you avoid the tariff.
Okay, so it's about onshoring production. But for India, the key distinction here must be between branded patented drugs and generics, right?
Absolutely crucial. That's the critical detail that shapes the potential impact on India. The source material is clear. The tariff targets branded and patented drugs.
And it specifically exempts generics.
Correct. And since generics are the vast majority of India's pharmaceutical exports to the U.S., that's where India's global dominance lies. This exemption is hugely important.
So does that mean the Indian pharma industry isn't too worried? Limited impact.
That seems to be the general view among experts. Cited the overall impact should be limited because the core generic business is protected. However,
There's always a however.
There's still significant nervousness in the market because of potential ambiguity in how the rules will be applied. The classification details really matter.
What kind of classification issues?
Two main areas of uncertainty mentioned. First, branded generics. These are generic drugs, but they're marketed under a specific brand name, often by the original company or a large generic firm. Will they be treated as branded or generic under this tariff? It's not entirely clear.
Okay, that could affect some major products.
Yeah.
What's the second area?
Even more critical, potentially, active pharmaceutical ingredients, or APIs. These are the fundamental chemical components, the raw materials needed to make all drugs, including generics.
Right. India is a huge supplier of APIs globally.
Exactly. And the worry is, could some APIs, especially newer or more complex ones, somehow get caught up in the definition of branded or patented inputs? If API imports face a 100% tariff, that would disrupt the entire generic manufacturing chain, even if the final pills are exempt.
So that uncertainty is causing ripples.
It is. The source noted immediate dips in the share prices of major Indian pharma companies like Sun Pharma and Divi's Labs right after the announcement. Investors are clearly concerned about these potential gray areas and the risk of supply chain disruption.
But the policy itself, the incentive structure, is clear.
Oh, yes. It puts massive pressure on all global pharma firms, including the big Indian multinationals we talked about earlier, like Dr. Reddy's or Biocon,
Pressure to do what?
to invest in U.S.-based manufacturing. If you want to sell branded drugs in the U.S. market after October 2025 without that crippling tariff, you basically need to make them, or at least finish them, onshore. This perfectly aligns with the U.S. goal of strengthening its domestic pharma base.
What about the impact on U.S. consumers?
Short term, it could definitely increase costs, especially for people needing newer patented medicines that aren't made in the U.S. yet. But the administration's argument is that the long-term benefit of a secure domestic supply chain outweighs that potential short-term pain. For India, the generic engine looks resilient, but everyone's waiting for clarification on those crucial definitions, APIs and branded generics. That will determine the true extent of the impact.
And for our final segment today, we find ourselves back in the thick of geopolitics, tying together threads from earlier discussions, the U.S. tariff pressure, the India-Russia relationship.
Yes, this involves a very strong, very public pushback from India against comments made by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
What did Rutte say, and why did it provoke such a strong reaction?
Rutte was speaking in a CNN interview, and he made remarks linking Indian Prime Minister Modi's interactions with Russian President Putin directly to those U.S. tariffs we discussed.
The 50% tariffs on Indian goods.
Exactly. Rutte's assertion, or at least the implication, was that Modi had reached out to Putin to get clarity on Russia's strategy in Ukraine because India was feeling the economic squeeze from those U.S. tariffs.
So Rutte was suggesting the U.S. pressure was actually working, causing India to question its Russia ties or seek reassurance from Moscow due to economic pain.
That's precisely how it was interpreted. It fed directly into this ongoing narrative about India's difficult balancing act. And India's response was immediate and unequivocal.
What did they say?
The Ministry of External Affairs issued a statement calling Rutte's comments incorrect and baseless. They flatly denied that any such conversation between Modi and Putin about the tariffs had taken place. They essentially called it speculation.
And did India use this moment to reiterate its position on Russian oil?
They absolutely did. They doubled down on their defense of procuring Russian oil, framing it again, as essential for energy security and affordability for India's 1.4 billion people, especially given the volatility in global energy markets.
Sticking to the national interest argument.
Consistently. They highlighted that India has been a major buyer of Russian seaborne crude since the war began, and they defend this based purely on economic necessity.
The source also mentioned India making a countercharge against Western nations again.
Yes, repeating that accusation of hypocrisy we touched on earlier. The statement noted that many NATO members, many EU countries, continue to buy billions of dollars worth of Russian goods themselves, maybe gas, maybe minerals, other things, exempted from sanctions without facing similar public criticism or punitive actions from within NATO.
Trying to deflect the pressure by pointing out perceived double standards.
Exactly. It's a way of saying, don't lecture us when your own house isn't entirely in order on this issue.
What was the specific diplomatic message sent to NATO?
It was quite direct. The Indian government stated publicly that it expects NATO leadership to show greater responsibility and accuracy in its public statements. They warned against making speculative or careless remarks that mischaracterize sensitive diplomatic interactions.
So a clear signal. Don't use India as a pawn in your narrative, and get your facts straight.
Pretty much. India is forcefully asserting its right to define its own foreign policy and energy strategy, regardless of external pressure.
It is interesting, though, that despite all this friction, the tariffs, the oil dispute, the security allegations we covered, the sources also mention this visible public rapport between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi.
That's a fascinating layer, isn't it? The personal chemistry between leaders. Despite significant policy disagreements and these tough trade actions happening at the bureaucratic level, the two leaders themselves have often emphasized their positive relationship publicly.
What does that suggest?
It suggests that while the policy machinery might be grinding and applying pressure, the top-level diplomatic channel is being kept deliberately warm. It preserves the possibility, maybe, of a breakthrough or a negotiated settlement on these contentious issues down the line, driven by that personal connection. But for now, India's official stance is clear. National interest, particularly economic and energy security, comes first. Hashtag out.
So wrapping this all up, it's incredibly clear how interconnected everything is. From managing player fatigue in cricket
Right.
to making huge strategic choices about trade partners and energy sources. It all seems driven by this need to balance internal requirements against massive external pressures.
Absolutely. You can feel the tension across every single one of these sources. We've seen India operating in so many different arenas just today, celebrating that huge achievement in domestic tech with the Swadeshi 4G,
A big win.
managing a critical health need with the Ozempic approval right as the generic clock starts ticking,
Yeah.
and at the same time navigating these incredibly serious diplomatic and security crises, the alleged murder plot, pushing back hard against NATO comments, resisting U.S. pressure on Russian oil. It's a constant juggle.
So what does this all mean? Like the central theme that jumps out from this deep dive is that profound tension. The tension between looking after your own national interests, whether that's affordable energy for over 1 billion people, or secure digital networks, or protecting a key export industry like pharma, and the intense pressure you get from global conflicts, from trade partners trying to dictate your choices.
Spot on.
India's decisions right now, whether it's who plays in that cricket final after a tough match or where they buy their next shipload of crude oil, these choices have massive ripple effects globally.
And that really brings us back to that core question of leverage, doesn't it? We see India pulling off this incredible feat of deploying its own indigenous 4G, soon 5G network, a real marker of technological sovereignty. But at the same time, they're facing these heavy U.S. tariffs aimed squarely at influencing their foreign policies, specifically their energy choices. So the provocative thought maybe for you, the listener, to mull over is this. Does that kind of technological independence actually give India real, tangible geopolitical leverage in these tough negotiations? Or, at the end of the day, does the basic fundamental need for energy security and the sheer volatility of that global oil market remain the ultimate pressure point that other powers can use against them?
A fascinating question. Does tech sovereignty trump energy vulnerability? Or is it the other way around? Something to definitely think about as these global dynamics continue to unfold.
Indeed.
Until next time.